The school journey has been a long one. I think I started taking college classes in 2007 when I made the ski team. Sorry, 2006. But I think uh and so I think I started with the Westminster program originally when the ski team had free college tuition for Westminster. I'm like, wow, I'm in Park City. I might as well take some classes in Salt Lake. And so me and one of my teammates, Noah Hoffman, started taking classes together, and there was no like agenda. We just what the focus was Nordic for us. So it was like which class time period is in person, because part of the goal was to meet people that were not in sport. So we wanted to take in person classes, and which ones fit with our schedule. So like that narrowed the group down like a ton. Plus, it's in the summer at a liberal arts school in Utah, and so there wasn't a ton of opportunity to take any sort of classes that went down like a particular path. But at that time, it was okay because, and it still was. I mean, I got a lot of general classes done, which I probably otherwise wouldn't have. And I had a blast with Noah. And it was just, we met some really awesome people that ended up, he was much better about like keeping in touch with me than, or with his friends than I am. And he actually like continued to go rock climbing and things with these people that we'd met in school. And of course, like I just like I just never followed up with I'm afraid of heights, so those kind of activities weren't really my zone. And so anyway, the journey has been long. I think there's been a couple years that I haven't taken classes, but I've been trying to be pretty consistent. I mean, for a lot of different reasons. When I was an athlete, it was like to think about something other than just sport, because it's so easy to just your whole life revolves around sport. And then very quickly, without really noticing, it's like you turn off the relationships in friendships or even just like family that aren't easily helping you in your journey. And then all of a sudden, like everything becomes about you and your whether you did well that session or not as well that session. Like a common saying that one of the Swedish girls taught me was like, "You're only as good as your last session." Even though that's not true, that's how our brain tends to think about things as professional athletes, unless we train them to do otherwise. And so, if you're only as good as your last session or your last race, that's a lot of up and down, even like morning to afternoon. So the school part kind of let me even out. Think about myself as a more well-rounded human, which I believe helps performance in the long run as well. So long answer to your question about what am I really doing. I'm trying to. My goal is to be a nurse at some point. This is actually my last class finally before I can apply to nursing school. And somewhere along that journey of being so sure I wanted to be a nurse, I have now kind of like deviated and kind of am questioning whether hospital life is really what is going to fill my cup for the rest of my career life. And so I'm in that place right now where I'm trying to figure that out. And nurses tell me, well, you don't have to work in the hospital, you can work in 8,000 different areas, and I know they're right. And so I just need to figure out if that's the journey I want to go down. And of course, you can go down a journey for a couple of years and go, yeah, that's just really not for me, and go down another one. But as I get older, I want to kind of try and hone in like another skill at the same level that I tried to hone in my sports. And so that takes time. And so I don't want to waste a ton of time trying to figure out whether it's perfect, but maybe just, is it close enough? Does it meet all of the criteria of what is important to me? And then try and make that job hit all those markers, which all jobs have places that don't feel good. And so that's the journey I'm on.
Yeah. Well, hey, talk about consistency. I mean, yes, maybe there's some on and offs in there. You're pushing education for higher education for almost 20 years, Liz.
I could be like a really, really specialized doctor at this point.
And I think you are, and that would be the PhD of life.
Oh,
Definitely
thank you.
knowing you. I am curious though, like, so I've gotten fragments in some of our, conversations or whatever, but like, so you're from the East Coast originally, like Vermont?
Yes. Yeah, Vermont.
So you moved out here early 2000s for ski team. What was, I don't know, like pre-Utah Liz like? Like what did that look like and how has that maybe set you up along the, and you can describe it like the past that you've at least I've known you in the last couple of years of like you're coaching, you're doing a lot, like everything from sport to other life endeavors. I don't know, walk me through
Yeah.
that. Are you an artsy person? I've seen some of your MTV music stuff on YouTube. So I know there's musical talent in there. But just loosely describe that to me.
Yeah.
East Coast coming out here and how that has gotten you engaged in a lot of different stuff from coaching to your own career in sport, etc.
Yeah. Well, I think your podcast title, movement potential, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, it is a it is like it resonates because from being a really young kid, I had um a lot of energy. I don't know, in some environments it was certainly classified as too much energy, including in school. And so my movement potential was always very high and always like I needed to get it out in order to be able to focus. And so it started kind of from a young age of like, Liz, you got to go take a lap and then come back and sit down. The good teachers would do that, right? They recognize the kids that are like, they just need to get their wiggles out and then
I
they
don't know.
can
It sounds like
focus.
they may have encouraged an addiction there, Liz.
True. That could also be. But it is, I do think about school nowadays, like in elementary school, so few have like gym class. And I think about myself at that age and just like, wow, like if I wanted my brain to even want to learn anything new, I needed to go move. And that's an area that I feel really passionate about. Like kids need to move. I certainly did. And so as a young age, I kind of tried to do all the things. I grew up as an alpine skier. That was kind of what my family did on the weekends. I kind of fell in love with the competitive side of it. And so I started doing these like this kind of lollipop league at Burke Mountain, which was about an hour from where I grew up. And continued that all the way through I guess I was 15 when I started trying out Nordic. But before that, my parents would take us. We were like such lucky kids looking back on this. Like I think about just day-to-day busyness of adults, and my parents had full-time jobs, and their weekends were really the only time that they had to catch up on working on like the 250-year-old farmhouse we lived on. And yet they took their time to take us up to ski like every day on the weekends. Like it was that's how I remember it. I'm sure there were weekends off, but it was so frequent that like my memory is every weekend in the winter we'd go up there. And it was like Burke became like a little family for me. It's a tiny town. There's no stoplights. Like still to this day, there's like a general store, a few restaurants, and some inns. And the mountain really hasn't changed either. And so it was super family friendly. My parents liked to ski and they would kind of just drop me and my brother off and we'd just like haul around on the mountain with like cool coaches and just had a blast. And so when I got to be the age to go to Burke Mountain Academy, which is a ski academy right at the base of the mountain, I was like, I'm in. I totally want to do this. And at that point, so my parents, again, luckily, they had the financial well being to do that. And I like bought full in. I thought it was so fun. The community was like 65 kids total from eighth grade to senior year. And and like you lived on campus in this little in like five different dorms, and we had a big dining hall, and the campus has evolved a lot since I was last there, but they still keep the size to about 65 to 70 kids. And when I went, there was a Nordic team there as well. And so when I was about 15, I kind of had I'm a pretty small statured person. I'm like 5'2" on a good day. And uh Alpine just kind of it got harder and harder the more I stepped up into different age categories. And I had, my love for Alpine, I think, was honed by skiing like all over the mountain and doing jumps and just like being a kid. And when it became time to really like spend a lot of time in gates and really focus on like the time it took you to get from top to bottom, I kind of lost interest a little bit. And I'm sure it didn't help that I wasn't progressing as fast as my peers, but I also just felt like it wasn't filling my cup. I'd get to the bottom and just kind of be like, man, I wish it was longer. I can't believe we're already done. So I kind of there's the long journey through all of this was that I decided that I should try out Nordic because I had gotten very into running in high school, um and so I was running for the cross country team at my home high school because Burke at the time didn't have one. And so I was really unique this way. I would go to my public high school in Montpelier for the fall so I could run cross country, and then I would transition to Burke for the winter and spring. And the coach at the time, who has now been the head coach of the US team for like the last like 25 years, Matt Whitcomb, had just taken over for the previous coach, as the Nordic director. And so he came to one of my cross country races and was just like, hey, the headmaster actually sent me here to like see if you wanted to try out Nordic. And I was like, well, he seems kind of fun. Like, but I think that's a really dorky sport and I can't imagine I'm going to like it, but I'll give it a shot because I really wanted to stay at the school. And
Sounds like a
so I
detention. Instead of detention, here's your consequences having to do some cross country ski Nordic.
totally, oh my God, totally. And I was like, they just ski around in these spandex suits and it's just so dorky. And I, of course, like, just I just had to lean into it because I was a total dork too. And like it ended up being that the sport was just like it couldn't have been a better fit for me. I mean, the team at the time was just so it was about 8 people, if I remember right. They were so inclusive. Like what's so great, and this has not changed in all the years of Nordic, like the community is so inclusive. Like when you're new, people are like, sweet, like welcome to the party. And I've noticed the same thing in a few ultra environments I've been in, ultra running. Same thing.
Mhm.
It's like it's such an obscure sport, and it's gaining ground for sure, ultra running and Nordic in the US, but it they're pretty still obscure sports. And so when new people come, they're just like psyched. They're just like, how can we help you? Which is a totally different environment than the alpine side of things that really had become very much a competitive focused thing and a result focused thing. And so it was such a refreshing, like just joy, like pure joy. I mean, Matt was such a good junior coach. He's a great coach as an elite team coach too, but he just wanted us to have fun. And I think the way he coached me in high school has kind of led me to the way I try to coach here as well. But I certainly there are some aspects in Vermont that are unique, and we don't really have them in Utah, so it's hard to recreate at all times. But Vermont is there's like there's rainy days every single week, right? And it's muddy and it's dreary and the trails aren't perfectly manicured, and there's a lot of like bushwhacking you can do where there's like just brush for you know acres and acres and acres. And Matt just like would take us on these adventures with no trail and just kind of like run around, circumnavigate like Burke, or and we'd run through like fields of nettles or pricker bushes, and we would just come out looking like we just like came out of the woods for like after 2 years. But it was just so fun. It was like the same, like this movement potential that kids have, that just like they just want to move, they just want to like be kids. And I think I was really lucky in the ability to like really have that in the school I went to, and like just the coach that got me hooked on the sport. And then jumping ahead, Matt ended up being my coach for like the entire time I was on the national team also, which was like great friendship. And just like it was nice to have the consistency, of somebody who has your well-being, because you saw that when you're in high school. Like it's easier to trust somebody who has like your true well-being at heart. And then I think there's also some negatives to that, because at some point in your career you want somebody that really like pushes you hard to see where your limits are. And I think at times I've wondered whether it would have been at least interesting to see how it would have responded to a different style of coach. But I wouldn't change anything. I mean, I just had like such a great experience on the national team and in high school. but that's kind of what brought me to Utah. And the reason I moved to Utah when I made the team was I'm somebody who's like, I'm all in. I like, if this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. And so that was like, we're moving to where the team is based, and I'm shooting for the moon here. And I think that's the way you can find your potential, but also the potential of the people around you to really help you achieve the goals that you want to. And it was really fun to get to know like all the high performance staff like very well, being in the COE all the time and being kind of like a test bunny on a lot of these kind of things that we were trying to find with Nordic at that time. It was fun for me to be in that, which has actually kind of started to kind of why I'm starting to think that nursing might not be exactly the right fit, because I do think the high performance and just like human performance aspect of medicine is kind of intriguing.
No, I think I love your journey, and I think I know I've mentioned a couple jokes in there around Nordic. I grew up playing a lot of team ball sports, so like any sort of like, why would I just go run? Like I run up and down a court, but I don't want to run more than that. But I didn't really make that flip of like psyched to like again another joke like psychotic type, breakthrough on the endurance side until much later. I would say more like during my like undergraduate and college where like I was done playing high school like team-based sports like with consistency. I did pick up basketball games and things like that, and it's been a little bit more sporadic. It's been less consistent since high school for sure, but I started to realize like I'm just interested in this for like the cognitive challenge, and then the cognitive challenge grows right into well, physical, then cognitive, and a lot of other stuff interspersed in there. And I realized that wow, I'm actually much more of like an endurance junkie than I thought I was. Like I'm not someone that's
Yeah.
going out for a 3 hour run, but I'm someone that I found like, okay, I like to really suffer. I like that type two fun. And I like to suffer for like 40 to 90 minutes, like really hard if I can redline that. So I don't know, maybe recruit me for like a sprint or something,
I
for,
would love that.
for like, but I'm always curious at a young age, and my brother, he was an elite gymnast for a long time, of like always curious as to like people who it's usually like a long process before you maybe are an actual team or an elite level. But like somewhere early on, whether it was progress or whatever, like there was a flip that switched for someone, right? I'm always curious as to like
Mhm.
what it was. And you speak really highly, I think, of your experiences through Burke and your parents, which I think is awesome. I'm wondering, is there like, I don't want to say like a moment, but you mentioned like just the idea of play and like how your coaches and your perceptions of sport, like you had energy you need to let out and you just like play. I'm attaching those words to maybe like maybe it's misrepresenting what you're saying, but like is there a
No.
switch that you noticed? Like even just looking back of like this is kind of what it was. I can't quite put my finger on it, but like I just like the invitations that the environment had and I wanted to see what I could do with it. And maybe like I like the physical challenge of seeing what I can do with it, and then the rest is just like I don't know, like physical curiosity in a way.
Yes. I think that's a really interesting question. And I imagine like almost every elite athlete you ask this, or former elite athlete, like their answer is probably different. And I like a good comparison is like my teammate for a long time, Keegan Randall, who ended up winning like the first American gold medal with their teammate Jesse Diggins. They she like remembers watching the Olympics from when she's like 8 years old and is like, I'm gonna go win a medal in the Olympics someday. Like that's a crazy journey. It took her until the very last year she was ski racing to do that at like 35 years old. I mean, think about that journey. That's a long time. And yet I can't remember watching an Olympics until I was like at Burke in high school. And I was still just not really, it wasn't what got me up out of bed in the morning. I think when I think back on like the things that have kept me inspired throughout, it's been um like the relationships I have with teammates or other like members of the greater team. Um, and this like real desire to figure out like what is the potential for my body and my like the human potential of my own body and my own brain. And I think maybe even more than the physical side, like the mental side to me was really fascinating. And I think that's the one thing I wish I could go back and do over, because there's been, since retiring, I've had like 8 years to kind of think back on the career at times on a long run or whatever. And I think about, man, if I had the mental state that I'm able to get in now, where it's like you see a much bigger picture than I ever did as an athlete, just like this down the path this way. And no matter how hard I tried, all I could see was like just right ahead of me. I feel like now I have a much more like 360 view of like what is really like going to get you better, as you zoom out of where you are right now, like what actually is missing in your training or missing in your mental preparation or in like the rest days, the time away from the sport. Like if you never take your brain away from the sport and on the rest day you're just wondering who of your competitors is training harder, it's not really a rest day. And so how much better could I have gotten if I had been able to get to a different mental perspective on what this sport really is, like how long this sport is really going to last. But I think when you're in it, you're just going day to day and trying to like keep up, instead of just like being able to see like, okay, this is a long-term thing. How do I want this to really look, and what do I need to get there? So a moment, I really think the moments just added up to like wanting to see what my potential was. And I think that's actually what took me away from Alpine, where it was so number driven. It was just like, okay, the numbers told me I skied that course slower than I did the last run, and I'm 2 seconds off my teammate. It was all focused on that, not intentionally. It was just, that's just how it is. It's so objective. Is that the right? Why do I get objective and subjective confused? But objective, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay. And yet Nordic, you can't compare times. Like you're out there to like, I mean, these races you start sometimes like totally by yourself, like 30 seconds behind the person in front of you and 30 seconds in front of the person behind you. And it's just like you're out there to push yourself. And that's unique in sport. And I think, especially in an endurance sport like that. And I think that drew me in, like, because out there, you are only as good as you are. There's no one to like keep you going up that hill, or maybe you get a split out there, but it was like what is my potential right now, how can I get a little more out of myself, and that was this addictive process to me. So
See, interesting over my whatever physical sporting career that I still engage in or whatever. It's like I have leaned more and more into that, like more the mental side. And I would say
yeah,
a lot since I've gotten like strength conditioning, like I've really leaned heavy into it because I understand that like so just more about the body and other stuff that it's like once you break through a lot of just like the physical stress, like maybe that's the psycho in me is like that's just the buy-in, but like the place I want to do,
totally.
and bask in is like all up in here, up in my head. Can I just I wanted to follow up actually on one of the things you kind of mentioned just around like if you want to call it your why or the switch as you're describing like some of your teammates and yourself is like I generally think of my why for something I do or or my passion, it's like it is evolving. Like it's it may have underlying principles or principles that underpin it that are consistent throughout a 20, 30 year, career or engagement in, Nordic, for example. But every 5 years or something, or even every year, every day, the passion, there's things that emerge and decay, right? Based on the level I'm at or new levels that I reach. And an example of this might be like I found myself when I first started getting really into like strength conditioning, like it started off in like actually like just fitness, right, in high school to complement team sport. Then when I was doing some PT and other stuff, I realized, oh, there's actually like a sports performance side of fitness. And then from there, it's like I kind of went through, I think like 3 to 5-ish years, which was in parallel with my undergrad of like, I just need to spend a lot of time in the trenches and work my butt off, but I was so zoomed in on certain aspects that I didn't have that like zoom out, like, hey, it might be good for you, Brian, to kind of slow down or think bigger picture, maybe some more mobility or whatever. But I was just like, I'm in it. I want it all. I'm gonna eat and or try and bite off more than I can chew. And things work out that I was at an age where like I could probably handle that higher volume, or like I was doing more than I needed to. Zoom ahead, I'm like, okay, I don't need to do that, but that that which no longer served me at that time to help me get to where I am. So that is something that I perceive like what was underpinning that was, let's say, passion, right, for the said activity. That passion still underpins what I do now, but I needed that perspective of being 100 and thinking I was 110% in. And now my all in is just a very different distribution. I think
Yeah.
that comes with it, speaking to experience, but I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your perspective because it sounds like, as you're talking about teammates or other things, it sounds like you two have had your process, your ebbs and flows, your waves of like, I have been in the darkest and I am like literally depressed by the fact that I feel maybe like my self-worth is determined by my performance. And you've had those ebbs and flows where you've also then been able to come out on the other side of that and realize, no, I can perform and I've given it my all, and things just couldn't have worked out. And I can still have relationships with family and make progress in education, and other personal like relationships and pursuits. Just walk me through that. I know this is like a long-winded like background context of just how I think about it, but it sounds like you've been through your own ringers multiple times. How has that
Yeah.
continued to reinforce you playing the infinite game? You're playing it to play. And yeah, what are some of those ebb and flows that you feel like have actually made you realize like, yeah, I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I needed those good and bad to be where I'm at. Sorry, it's not a well-phrased
Yeah, no,
question.
I actually think I hope I'm going to answer this in the question that you're asking, but something that came to mind when you're talking about this. Um, you know, it's taken me 8 years, basically, maybe 7 years of my eight, to to be able to say out loud that I think I struggled for almost my whole career with disordered or eating disorders of some kind without bursting into tears to tell you this. And I feel as though that has been my greatest accomplishment moving out of sport to get to where I am today. And be able to like share my story in a way that may help lead others down a slightly different path than I led myself down. And I think that when I think about like the ebbs and flows, I think that sometimes your bot I was so caught up in my kryptonite, I think, was like um I want to I want to make sure I look the part, because if I don't look the part, which like now that I have a better perspective, there is no part that you have to look like, especially in Nordic skiing. I mean, you look at the top 10 at every World Cup and they are every shape and size. Like, but in my disordered eating brain, everyone was this tiny person and they had more muscles than I did and they looked leaner and they just looked the part. And I was just doing my best to try and fit in. And I think when you have those kind of mindsets, whether it's around eating or it's around something completely different, if you feel like you're not fitting in, and then you can't actually be your full self either, because you're just trying to be someone else all the time. And so I think that as I think about the ebbs and flows, I think that yes, that was something that if I had better control over during my competitive years, could I have skied for a couple more years at a high level? Could I have gotten more out of myself? Could I have seen better results? Yes, maybe. But I will say that now that I'm a coach, I feel that I have a perspective that is so valuable, especially to the women I coach. That's like certainly above and beyond. There are more women that struggle with this than men. And I know there's also men that struggle with it. Um, but to be able to kind of like, I've gone through the dark, I've come through the midlight, and now I'm like, feel like I'm looking down and around on, not down, but looking around better in a full picture that's like, I can see the mistakes, and I can also still hear the monologues that I would tell myself over and over. And what has really blown my mind as I've like moved away from this is how much time I was spending every day, but even every minute, on thinking about like a body image issue, right? And that is like, just that alone, that energy that you're using for negative, like self talk, holy crap, like 20 years of negative self talk, Jesus, that like, that is the biggest problem with the eating disorder. Yes, there's the physical, like scary physical stuff that I've also dealt with, but there is the mental self talk that is just like so negative that takes the longest to get past. And I think that as athletes, everybody wants to, for me, it was like looking the part made it feel that I was doing all I could. Like if I didn't look a certain way in my brain, how I was supposed to look, then I wasn't doing all that I could to be as good as I possibly could in the sport. And there were so many people that were trying to help me be as good as I could. That was the least I could do, was just give it 110% every day. But I was focused on the wrong stuff. And that only, I think when you're in it with that, it's really hard to hear anybody say anything that really resonates, because you think you're, at least I thought I was invincible. I was different than others. I wasn't going to have the bone density issues. Um, I wasn't going to be slower after a few years. Like I just was different, and I wasn't, because I'm a human. And so I think me being able to know what a lot of that self talk sounds like allows me to connect a little bit more with the athletes that I'm working with who might also be struggling with this kind of stuff. And I think it gives me a perspective on myself that I wouldn't otherwise have, and it has allowed me to keep my perspective in this, in like the next part of my life. Like, what are the things that are most important to me going forward? Yeah, I'd love to run a fast marathon someday, and I have a few other little competitive goals that that are off in the distance at some time. But I think more than anything, the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is like, I want to be healthy. I want to be able to do the things I like to do. And I want to be a role model for the kids that I'm coaching and the people that are in my life. And the people that I value in my own life are those people. Like they're the people that model what I want to be in my own life. And I think like being around the COE with the kids that I coach now, and getting to like kind of like talk with you and talk with Will and talk with Tashana and like these guys, and Calvin, and I mean there's so many, right, that I like have just been able to glean little like pieces of information that I'm like, oh, I haven't tried that with these kids. Maybe I'll try that. Or so it's like this continuing education that's so fun to be around. And also I think that something that should be said more often, and is starting to be in the conversation, and you guys do such a good job, I've seen you do this with your athletes, is like, we are training an athlete, but we are caring about the person first. Like these are athletes, and they are people before they're athletes. And so no matter how big their athletic goals are, if their knee surgery isn't fully recovered and ready for them to jump back into a super G race, like we're going to stop them because that's our job, and I think that if you value the person before you value what they can bring to you, bring to the team, bring to the world as an athlete, you're going to get the best potential out of that human too, because people need to be seen as people. And I was seen as a person. Like this is not, I'm not calling anybody out. This was my own problem. I had great support and great help. And I think that my issue was that I didn't see myself that way. And I think the more we can um, train athletes to have like the right self-talk and the right, like, see themselves from like 10 years old as a kid who's out there playing, and that we want this to be fun, and look at all the people on at the highest elitist level that still talk about sport as being fun. I mean, I don't know athletes that, I'm sure they're out there, but the majority of athletes that you hear say like relive your best result ever, and tell me the number one thing you were like feeling while you were out there. I mean, I would bet 80% of the people fun is right up there. Like I was really enjoying the moment I was in, you know. And I think that if we can instill that in kids, then we have a really good chance of instilling that same thing as they move into the elite form of athletics or into something completely different. Which is what I find really fun about coaching, like just seeing these kids progress into humans that are like caring individuals. They like expect a lot of themselves. They expect a lot of their teammates. And the more people that can expect that of themselves, is caring, kind, hardworking, um, inclusive, respectful person, like the better our world is going to be, whether it's like these kids going to athletics or these kids going to nursing or building houses. Like this world needs more love in it. And I think that the more that we can teach that in coaching and athletics, what a safe environment to fail in and what a safe environment to grow in. Um, so that's long-winded, but that's how I feel.
No, thank you so much for shedding light on that. I'm glad you bring that to light. And I can speak with you offline about this later, but
Yeah.
I personally struggle with very similar things, and I still do. I think though, where I'd like to kind of go from here is like you learn a lot, I think, from the environment you say you're in, right? Being the COE and whatnot. You've learned a lot, I think, across your own athletic career. As a coach, though, like for myself and seeing you coach, like I learned so much from you. Like, so I'll be right, I'll be down there in the morning, like lights out, you guys come in, lights on or whatever. And
For those of you who don't know, they're listening to this, Brian works out at like I think he gets her at 4 in the morning. It might be 5, but I think it's 4. And and he works out and he's in there like for hours. And he does like one of the things I really value about Brian is that you have this ability to like really think about the exercise you're doing, do it with purpose and intention. And it's oftentimes like a kind of a unique movement, and when I ask you why you do it, you have the answer. It's not like it's willy nilly. Like you've thought about, I want to get this specific rotation of this muscle better. I'm going to do this. I've loved seeing that with you. So continue.
but I mention this because I think I've almost been in my current this organization right for almost 3 years, and I think pretty much from day one you guys have been using this space since I've been here. It's like December 22 is when I started, and I think that was like your first year in our space. I have learned, and that was when Will was still working with you guys. I have learned so much from you, Adam, and Will, and the PCSS crew. And fortunately, we have now snagged Will, so he's still around, just different. But but it has given me so many different ideas and a different lens as to how coaches can interact with athletes. And a big goal of mine long term is to work with kind of a more high school adolescent type population, mainly because of I think the profound impact that physical preparation as well as just like like this idea of infinite movement potential, what that can be instilled at that age. Whether athlete those that participate end up being an elite athlete or just want to engage in movement across their lifespan. That is something that I value, and I see that as a ideal population to work with. That said, though, I have learned so much from you, and one of the things beyond the ideas is how much you run around and coach with just such passion and authenticity. Prior to me coming here, I think I left a lot of the college space originally because it felt very toxic. I felt suppressed in who I was, trying to conform to what a strength coach should, sound and look like and militaristic and be a little bit. And that's what that setting kind of requires, maybe, right? Not that there aren't authentic coaches out there in the collegiate sphere, but I felt like a part of me was being suppressed. Seeing how you interact with the coaches, Adam, Will, as your peers, as well as with the athletes you coach, I think started to open doors to me as, wow, people can do this and it's actually a really fun session. Like, not just fun, but like, I feel like, oh, I can just come up to you and talk to you, like, so much more engagement and buy-in. And I know those are like a lot of trigger words, but how do you feel like, either consciously or unconsciously, how do you feel like you found your own coaching style? Is it, did you start, for example, like trying to like imitate how you were coached and it's evolved and you've kind of unlocked levels to yourself as you've kind of realized like, at the end of the day, we need to make this fun so we stay in it too. Walk me through that process. Like how have you, I don't even want to put a title on it, but how have you gotten to the way you coach?
That's
Whether that's
a good
instinct.
question. It's
And I know you mentioned Matt, and I've fortunately been able to work with him a couple times since I've been here, and absolutely phenomenal leader and outstanding human. So I have that to Shauna. You've mentioned a bunch of people that I'm familiar with that no doubt I'm sure have had influence over you, but just to elaborate on, yeah, your coaching style. That'd be awesome.
yeah, I think I made I made probably the classic mistake that that every like former elite athlete who goes into coaching juniors makes, which is like, oh, I'm just gonna treat them like I'm gonna take my training plan and I'm just gonna make it halfsies. And it was like, oh, cool, we'll just train them like little mini elite athletes. It's like, whoa, dude, that like does not work. Thankfully, I had like an older guy who was the head coach at the time when I started coaching, and he'd been coaching for his whole life. And so he kind of let me do my things and like make mistakes throughout. And then he would be like, we can't do that. Here's why. Do you understand? And it would be like, yeah, okay, I get why you're saying, which sounded just lazy to me at first. Like, oh, you just use the same hill all the time for intervals. And it's like, oh, it's because when we try and do this, the kids like freak out because they don't have enough time to get from class to training. And it's like, it was like a whole thing. So he kind of let me make the mistakes and then he would be like, let's talk about it. So I valued that a lot. But I think the evolution of like very quickly, I realized like, and all the reading I started doing too, like junior athletes are not mini elite skiers. Like you want them to evolve through different movement patterns. We want them to be doing more like sprint, like dynamic training when they're at that age. We don't want them to just go on long, slow distance runs all the time, which is like I love to do. So it's like I had to start thinking about these athletes as junior skiers, not as little elites. And that happened pretty quickly because it was kind of like necessary to make that change. And once I started realizing that, I think I then jumped into like, how can I make it similar to what I grew up in, right? Like the environment Matt created, which was fun, kind of running around doing cool things. And I think that was a little hard. Like I kind of mentioned, it's hard to do in Utah. It's much more manicured here. There are definitely other ways to accomplish those same goals, but you can't just go find the woods in the middle of nowhere and go run through brambles and like get your toughness on. It's like you got to be a little more creative. It's just a different environment. And I think that somewhere along the way, I kind of came into maybe more of my own style, which is always hopefully still evolving for as long as I coach, but which is, trying to meet the athlete where they're at. I provide the structure of the training plan. And over the years, you're working with a high school population. So you're going to have somebody who has a goal of making the Olympic team, and you're going to have somebody who has a goal of just learning how to ski. And you are in charge of everything in between those two extremes. And so if you just make a training plan for the kid up here, but you forget the kid back here, you don't create the team that you're trying to create. So it makes junior coaching really challenging, which I really like about it, I think, because you really do have to figure out how do you get how do you keep this kid engaged while also using this kid's like excitement for the sport and knowledge and technique to bring the others along with him or with them. And so that's been really fun to try and figure out. I've like tried a bunch of different ways to do that, and some of them have totally flopped, but I think that's how you learn, right? And so I think the main thing that I want my kids to feel is, yeah, supported, but also supported to fail and encouraged to fail, because I think that safety of like, I'm just going to do what I know I can do is where you just get stuck and not actually um, figure out like how you progress as a human, let alone an athlete. Like failure is part of being human. We are all going to fail. I mean, everyone listening to this podcast has failed, and we're going to keep failing. And I think the more we can just be okay with that, that's where we start finding the like, okay, I failed. Like, kids aren't mini elite skiers. Failure. I coached to that. Okay, let's bring it down to like maybe we go way below where we want to be now. And we're like, okay, well, they can do a little more like that. Maybe that's also a failure. A kid, a kid sees a failure as like a missed result, right? Like they didn't win the race they wanted to race, or they want to win. And I think the more we can, or the more I can kind of say, hey, let's not create all these outcome goals. Let's create them. Let's have them. But then let's really work on like what is the journey to get to those. And the journey can look like the movement stuff that you've been doing with the elite team, like that, or the national team. That stuff is so fascinating to me, and I want to like learn more from you on that, because it's these building blocks that get the athletes to like be able to know when you say like swing your arm through more relaxed, use your like finish by like squeezing your tricep. They actually know what I'm talking about. And if we don't have any like the ability to for them to know how to move, then when you say that, it's like going right over their head. They have no idea. And so I think starting, what I would like to do over the next few years is figure out how to get these starting blocks of these kids that start in the gym at ninth grade. Where do we start that, all of them? Where do we get them so that they're like, we know that they are able to move well before we add weight, before we add um, challenge to the movement, before we add, these upper level kind of movement and weight patterns that we want to get to. And I think right now, unfortunately, we've Will, who is our strength coach, was amazing and so like creative with the movements like you are. And Adam and I are just, we're ski coaches, and we've been in the gym and we can make it work. But I think like the goal for me would be to have a strength coach that's full time, that would help us create these like building blocks, so that when we have a kid join in the fall, where the rest of the team has been skiing in May and years prior, we don't just drop them into wherever everybody else is because that's all we have the bandwidth for. We just go, oh, okay, kids, you know what you're doing. Cool. I'm working with this kid, and we work on the building blocks. So I think the movement patterns, the like just taking time to meet the kid where they're at is a big uh foundation of what I want to be as a coach, what I want to try and like, because I think again, it plays into the, if I meet you where you're at, I'm also seeing you as a person before I see you as an athlete. And I'm not just saying, if you can't keep up, you're off the team. Or you just keep trying to keep up. It's like, let's see where you're at. Let's get you to where you feel like you're progressing so that you stay with the sport. So
I think that's super cool. I will say like massive kudos to you because again, for people listening, like you are both a sport coach and running a lot of the S&C, which I think is really good, but also shows like how involved you are, and also I think that plays to probably a lot of relationships that you have, at least with your crew, right? Like that they get to
yeah,
see you in some aspects still in their environment because it's also yours being on snow,
yeah,
doing
yeah,
doing the thing. And then that probably helps translate well as well when you're then dry land, whether that's in the off
yeah.
season or still in season. I a thought I have is I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole in the last year and a half around ecological dynamics, understanding how the individual, the organism interacts with the environment and how you set up constraints and within a task for the individual or within the environment to create a certain type of problem solving behavior. Which is I see you do this organically, but I can send you some readings on it. I think you probably already do a lot of it instinctually. But you and I, we can chat more on that. I've been going down a rabbit hole in that. I too had been, I think, doing a lot intuitively, but now I'm doing it a little bit more deliberately, and I'm starting to see some dividends with athletes that I've been working with and exploring a lot of these techniques and applications with. That said, I often see, I think like the way you coach not only authentic, but like you're a really good problem setter. And this kind of is an idea that actually comes from ecological dynamics, but coaches being guides, right? And problem setters is we're not necessarily there to solve it for the athlete, because then the athlete's just going to imitate, right? Or, quote
Yeah.
unquote, imitate what we're asking. How can we set a problem that allows them to explore and come up with their own solution? And then we guide and or nudge them to, okay, that was good. But then what do we need to maybe adjust in how we cue the athlete, right? That would be an individual constraint. Or cue them to the task, like how do we help them focus their attention on something that maybe, oh, I see it a different piece of information that now I'm going to interact with this problem differently, and now I move differently, right? Whether that be on snow or dry land. And it's a really interesting idea that I see you sort of naturally employ a lot, especially with the sort of adolescent high school age population. Because yeah, I have seen some very early in their career movers that you've worked with, as well as I've probably seen about an entire class, high school class of 4 years, kind of go through. And it is really cool to see the culture that, yes, I know Will was a big kind of get the momentum going with it, but you, Adam, not only continuing but being a part of, have seen some really amazing movers come out of that. And I'm still every morning, why yes, doing my Batman, dark mode workout, whatever, looking over, and I just cannot believe that these are high school aged athletes in here as to how well they move and kind of the experience they have coming up, as well as the role models and influences that they're surrounded with, whether they know it or not. They're going to look back and say, wow, Liz, Adam, the entire PCSS group has really had a profound impact on my movement potential for life, which I think is super, super rad. That does lead
Thank
me.
you.
I know we've kind of hovered around it and you've infused it ahead of time a couple times. Um, I am curious, like, what does infinite movement potential mean to you? Like, that's the name of the podcast. I kind of selected it for a reason because I have my own evolving definitions, but at this time point, probably will evolve a year from now. What does that mean to you?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I love how you call it infinite movement potential. I mean, that sticks out to me because I think my new goal in life is to have infinite movement potential. I want to be able to move in ways that will evolve and change as I get older, but I want to be able to move. That's clear. And I think that the I like the word potential because everybody's potential is there. You hear about these athletes that have potential and it's like, yeah, they do. And so does everybody else. It might be a different potential than the other one, but it's the potential within themselves to see what their best is. That is always there. There's a coach who I really adore, Bernie, Black Horse Von Jess, or maybe her last name's still Nelson. I'm not sure. She's a coach, a junior coach as well as a wax tech for the U.S. team, and she uses the term. Um, oh man, I just forgot it. She uses the term. Um, it's gosh, now I feel silly. It's like a potential for like this is an opportunity. That's what it is. It's an opportunity for improvement. Like this interval session is an opportunity for growth. You have the opportunity to do somewhere between 5 to 7 intervals. And I think potential also has that frame in it. It's like it's this opportunity to continue your growth and your evolution throughout like your whole life, and that can be in any arena that you want it to be in. And I think the more that we as humans can see life as this opportunity for growth and potential for movement and change and dynamices, it's like then we have opportunity for so much more than we even have the ability to see right now, I think. So yeah, movement potential, infinite movement potential. It gives me like hope. It gives me like this, like I'm inspired by that title. Like I think if we can nail that, we're gonna be good. And so it makes me want to think about it. Like I'm gonna think about this as I'm coaching today. Just like how can we? What did you call it? Problem create?
Uh, how are you a problem setter? Like you set a problem.
Problem setter. I think it's such a cool term. I need to look that up because that is kind of what we're supposed to be doing as coaches. Like you put a cone in the way and you want the athlete to jump. That is a pro. You set the problem and now they're reacting to it and they're figuring things out as they do that. And without the problem there, they wouldn't figure it out. It's kind of like without the failure, they don't know the potential of the up and down and like where they shouldn't do it and where they should do it. So the safety zone is what I try to avoid. Not every day. Sometimes you need just a safe ski, but like as often as possible with junior skiers in particular, I think we want to challenge them in new ways and see what how their reaction occurs.
Yeah. Well, and as they demonstrate just their own growth, right, at their own on their own time scale, like that's where they can be a collaborator in the problem setting process. And that's where it's like the term co-design, right? They help kind of like you say, all right, we're doing hurdle hops every two. I want you to switch it up. It's like they start coming to you like, hey, can I jump over it laterally? Like, yeah, let's see what happens. It's like they are
Yes.
now collaborating in their own discovery of what is possible. And it's like you're
Yes.
giving them some parameters to work with. It's like, all right, ground contact, I still want to be fast or slow, maybe hold a load or don't, but then you can find your own challenge point by the end
Yes.
of the session. And that I think continues to create ownership and autonomy for the athlete, which is probably what keeps them coming back, right? And that's
Yeah.
you're kind of the guide.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The change. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Man.
think you touched on a lot of things, and this is just some ideas just to continue to add to food for thought, I guess, is like I very much like you. I think you touched almost word for word with the word opportunity. What was the name of the coach? Uh,
Bernie, no, you should get her on actually.
okay.
Bernie Nelson, that's her maiden name. She is married to a guy whose last name is Black Horse
Yeah, you have
Farm
to connect
Jess.
me.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
connect you too.
But
Yeah.
I think of potential in the same light is that like yeah, it's not just a oh they have potential they could or could not, but it is very much a what is the invitation to act? Like what
Yes.
opportunity is there? But then it's up for you to be an active agent in that situation and decide I'm going to act on this opportunity or I'm not. And it's not right or wrong if you do or don't. It's just a choice, and it's one without judgment. I think. Kind of along those lines too. It's like movement potential doesn't, I very much like think of it as like a growth mindset too, but like there can be growth in stasis, where like
Yes.
learning and development, it is non-linear. And when you zoom out, hopefully there's some sort of like linear trend as far as progress goes. But we often think of like when it comes to exercises or sport skill, it's like, is this a progression or regression? It's like, well, what if you just kind of like bask in the moment where occasionally there's some stasis, right? Just no change. And most people think of stasis as stagnation, it's like this
Yeah.
ugly, stinky brother of, progress and regression. It's like, no, there's actually a lot of value of like kind of solving the same problem, right? Or doing the same thing with some level of repetition so that you can actually explore other ways to do it. And then you continue to know that, all right, I can do this 100 ways. Of those 100 ways, 98 of them are stupid. At least I know I can do them those ways, but two are really stable. And those are the
Yes.
two that I'm going to lean into and I'm going to roll with for, my continued exploitation of my strengths or of this certain skill.
Totally.
But it's the fact that you spent time there that then affords you further potential or opportunities to act. That's how I
That's
think about
such
it.
it's a good way of thinking about it. And Will did that, like Will taught me that when we were working together because we would have a 6 week, that classic like 4 to 6 week training block and then it changes. Well, he would get to the end of 6 weeks and he'd look at me and he'd go, dude, we're doing this again. Like these kids finally have this same, like the movement pattern that now we can get strong with those same movements. We were just learning them before. And I was like, oh man, the kids hate it. They want to change, right? But it's like at the end of those 12 weeks or those like 10 weeks, they were actually moving strong in those movements. And so that got me to like start looking instead of just always changing the plan at 6 weeks because that's the magic number or whatever. It's just the magic number is actually when are they ready to progress, or do we still have more to gain out of these same movements before we change it up? So I think you're right. I think there is like some value in stasis, and consistency. I mean, I think that's one of the things I want my kids to hear from me more than anything is like it's nothing magical. You guys hate to hear this. There are no shortcuts. It is consistency. And if you guys skip days or you skip weeks or you don't put in, 80% every single day, which whatever, like the 100% every day just isn't realistic. So we talk about 80. Like if you bring 80 all the time, then there's going to be days you're 120 and there's days you're 60, but the average is always 80. But there's like you have all you just like the consistency can't be beat. It is the only thing that is like sure to work. And it's kind of like that slow turtle, like the slow turtle versus the hare. Like you are consistent, you're showing up. It might take you 10 years, but you will progress into what you want to be. And so the consistency of showing up, doing what you can, being a good teammate, like those are the values that I think carry these kids beyond, high school sport.
The mic drop right there. It's it's funny because so much resonates, and not that you need like one-liners, but Dr. Mike T. Nelson, who's well known in some of the sort of research academia as well as general like strength conditioning, nutrition world, has a couple phrases that could be like one-liners, but I think two of them is like, if you have robust or optimal, choose robust over optimal. And he had, since I've subscribed to his newsletter, he had one time, he's like, if you ever go and sit in a sauna in Finland, like you'll sit with some guys that maybe lifted weights, once in a while, but they were consistent with that once in a while for 10 years, and they're going to be strong as hell, as opposed to someone who, has been pushing really hard for a short time, but maybe was inconsistent or something. It's like, it's really hard to get it's really hard to not get good at something if you stay with it for, and he
Totally.
10 years, but just an extended period of time. Uh,
Yes.
so consistency, mic drop, love it.
Yes. Let's all be consistent.
Yeah. Well, if people want to get a hold of you, Liz, I really appreciate your time. What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, certainly I would love to hear from anybody. My email is L Stephen, which is spelled STEPHEN at Park City SS for like ski and snowboard.org. And I will happily answer any further questions or anything, but I'm like, man, oh yeah. And if there are any like people looking to be cross country coaches, we are pretty much always hiring. So reach out.
Love it. No, thanks again, Liz. This has been a super fruitful discussion, and I think we're just scratching the surface. So we'll make sure to have you back on in the future.
Oh man, thanks for having me, Brian. This has been really fun.
All right. Well, maybe catch you in a couple hours here.
Yeah, actually not today, but
Okay.
but soon.
All right. Well, good luck studying.
Okay.
See ya.
Thanks, Brian. See ya.